Well, hi everyone, Sean Humphreys here. Welcome to the presentation, Strategies for Making 2017 Amazing. Before we get into the presentation, I want to give you a bit of the backstory in terms of why we ran this presentation. It was actually part of the regular Lunch and Learn series we put together for clients. This was the January 2017 content. And it came out of a discussion that I'd had with some clients, and it's really just a general experience that I've had, that so often we get to the end of the year and you hear comments like, boy, another year's gone by, I don't know where the time's gone by, the time just seems to pass by so quickly. This general notion sometimes that time is just flying by and we're not doing anything intentional to grab hold of that time and to make good use of it, to really capture the moments that we have. So this presentation is about being intentional as we go into a new year, but how we can capture the year and to make it an amazing year through some very intentional strategies. Now, most of these strategies may not be new to you. It might be just a reinforcement of things you already know, but you may not be doing them. And so hopefully it'll be an encouragement to you with regard to that approach. And for others of you, there may be a lot of new content. So hopefully you'll be able to find one or two ideas that you can apply to this coming year as you go through the year. So again, this is about making this next year amazing. It's a series of strategies that we can apply every year as we go into a new year. We can do a reset and apply these strategies. So let's take a look at them. And what I encourage you to do is, in the show notes for this video presentation are the actual notes. It's a PDF. You can print that off and you can highlight things and make notes as you go through the presentation. Now, the first thing that I would like to do is just draw your attention to a resource page. We've put together a website referred to it as Take Charge or Change. It's a business that we've put together. It's not part of my Asante practice. It's an outside business activity, but it's a website that we curate content in the area of change and change readiness and professional resilience. So it's sort of building resilience relationally, emotionally, psychologically, professionally. When you go to that web page, it's www.takechargeorchange. You'll come to the home page, and at the top of the home page, you'll find this sign-up sheet. I'd encourage you to go in there, just use your email address, and that'll give you immediate access to a resource that we refer to as the Resilient Professional ebook. So I'd encourage you to go to that and download the ebook. Even better still, print it off, put it in a binder. And a lot of the strategies that we'll talk about today come from that book, and there are resources that will be very useful for you as you reflect on some of the points that we go through together. So one of the things I said in the presentation was that it all starts with energy. And it really is the currency for capturing our new year and making the whole year really productive. We need to be very intentional in finding ways to marshal our energy reserves, to increase our energy, to cultivate our energy, because ultimately if we don't, there will be a steady decline. And what we want to do is sort of fight that decline. You think about life, energy sort of, hovers around, keeps going, and then, sometime in our 40s, there's sort of this natural set point where energy sometimes begins to decline. And what we want to do is we want to fight that particular, inertia that we hit, that wall, as we hit the intersection between the busyness of life, not being able to attend to our own needs, looking at the needs of our family and our careers, and sometimes we get into some bad habits that lead to a decline of energy. So what we want to do is push the life expectancy of our energy reserves. We want to do that because whether it's making a contribution to our families, to our communities, and to our work, it requires lots of energy, and we need to be intentional around how do we foster those energy reserves. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about, the different areas that impact our energy reserves. And again, this may not be news to you, but it's good just to reflect on some of these points. And so the first one that we'll look at is the whole area of sleep, of course, really critical ones. Let me just give you a few pointers to think about. One of the things that my wife and I did this past year is we purchased some blackout blinds, and those blinds have been just incredible. Now, we had a lot of street light, city light that kind of came into our bedroom at night. Particularly in the summer when, sunset's a little bit later, we'd have more light coming in our bedroom than we would have liked. And when we were younger, it didn't seem to bother us too much. But I certainly can attest to the fact that once we put those blackout blinds in our room, it really led to a better sleep. So the more you can black out the light, keep that room dark, the better the chance is that you're going to have a good sleep. The other is to reduce what we call blue light. And blue light is something that gets emitted from our technology. So whether it's your iPad, your iPhone, your computer, your TV, this blue light is really something we have to pay attention to because it impacts negatively on our circadian rhythm. So it really has a potential to wreck our sleep cycle. So the worst thing you could do before you go to bed is to look at your technology. The general recommendation is try to keep from looking at your technology 2 hours prior to going to bed. Now, for many of us, that might not be something we can adhere to. So if you can't, then consider putting in a blue light blocker on your screen. Just Google that, and there's all kinds of apps you can get, as well as you can get glasses that you can wear that block out the blue light rays. So pay attention to that. It can have a big impact on your sleeping patterns. The next thing that you want to focus in on really relates to a good mattress. So when it comes to mattresses, we're sometimes a little bit cavalier in this area, and it's one of those things you want to pay attention to. Every few years to invest in a good mattress means you'll probably have a much better sleep. And you want to pay attention to your rituals. What kind of rituals do you have before you go to sleep? Prior to going to sleep, there should be some things that just tie you into kind of a downtime. It could be stretching, it could be prayer or meditation, it could be a bath, it could be mellow music, it could be leisurely reading that's not related to your work or stressing you out. And for sure, you don't want to be consuming news, TV news, or reading negative information before you go to bed. So pay attention to those rituals that you get involved in before you get to bed. The more you can sort of create a calm, relaxing environment, the better the chance that you're going to have a nice, relaxing sleep. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is the whole area of supplements. So when it comes to supplements, sometimes taking a melatonin supplement or magnesium supplements can aid in sleep. And just one more point about light. That whole light issue is important because your circadian rhythm works in such a way that when you wake up in the morning, as soon as the light hits your retina, it creates really cortisol to flood through your system. That really kind of wakes up the body. As you go through the day, and then as the daylight gets less and darkness sort of comes into our environment, it stimulates the production of melatonin as you go through the day, and that creates this natural desire to want to go to bed, this sleepiness. And so you want to be aware of your own unique cycles and to work with them in terms of your sleep and your rest and your rejuvenation. It's a really critical part of the whole area of energy. Now, the next area we'll take a look at is diet. Now, diet is a really tough one because diet really ties into the whole area of, let's just talk about it. It could be rituals, cultural practices, traditions, relationships, habits. And there's all kinds of things that influence our dietary practices. It could be social pressure, So diet's a really important one. Now, the thing about diet is we get into, just patterns. Sometimes it's being mindless in what we eat. We don't have any structure in terms of our dietary foods. Now, before we leave diet, I'll just make just one more quick comment. I mean, before we get into some of the specific tips, the biggest thing around diet is obviously diet is one of those things where it's relational, which is good. That's helpful. We also need to become much more mindful, and so becoming mindful really helps us in our dietary practices. We need to take into account also that our diet and food has medicinal or properties that will help promote health and energy. So it's a really important area. Anyway, in a few slides, we'll cover off some practical tips in more detail. Now, the next area I want to take a look at is the whole issue of movement. Movement is absolutely critical. And again, as we get older, a lot of us fall into habits of being, couch potatoes. Walking, exercise, movement becomes less and less a part of our day-to-day life. However, it's really critical as we age that we become really intentional around moving, because one of the issues that really confronts people as they get older is the loss of lean muscle mass and flexibility and balance. And all those things can lead people to be in care facilities long before they really needed to, had they just taken a little bit of prevention in their approach to movement. So my one encouragement to you is that, it doesn't take a lot of movement on a regular basis to have a big impact. Study after study says, if it's 3 times a week for 30 minutes, has a profoundly important impact, and that could be aerobic activity, it could be walking, it could be swimming, that kind of thing. In addition to that, you want to make sure you introduce some strength exercises into your routines. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to try to protect your lean muscle mass. If you want to maintain your independence long into your retirement, you want to make sure that you are lifting weights at least twice a week, and making sure you're doing a total body workout, your back, your legs, your chest, your arms, your shoulders, working on your core is really, really important. So enough said about movement. You already know that, but it's something we all need to, I think, get better at. Relationships are really key for many different reasons. So again, when it comes to energy, great relationships have a very positive impact on our energy reserves. Now, the flip side of that is true as well. So we all have had experiences where we have 1 or 2 relationships that aren't going well, and that can be a real drain on our energy. But if our relationships are going well, it really picks up our energy. And so, again, it's just being intentional around fostering practices that will build up the relationships in your life. It's not easy. I mean, none of us are perfect, and because of that imperfection, relationships sometimes get frayed to the edges. And I've got some information in the Resilient Professional ebook you can take a look at, but basically, just try to apply the things that you learned when you were young. There's one set of principles I learned many years ago at a business coaching program I went through. It's called the Habits of Trust. And Dan Sullivan, who was teaching the concept, said, there's 4 things you need to do consistently to really build up trust in people and the people around you. And I'll talk about that later on in this presentation. It's absolutely critical. But, he talked about the things being, number 1, show up on time. Number 2, say please and thank you. Number 3, do what you say you'll do. And number 4, finish what you start. And if you did that in every single relationship in your life, it would profoundly impact things positively. So think in terms of the habits of trust. So that would be my one encouragement to you. So this year, if you just focused on those 4 habits, it could profoundly impact your relationships. And then the last area on this particular matrix in terms of energy is service. It's very easy to look internally all the time and become very, very self-absorbed. But that actually drains us of energy. Ironically, we're wired in such a way that as we give of ourselves to others, that actually promotes more energy in our lives. And so if you've fallen into the habit of becoming insular, just worrying about your own problems and issues, not giving back, then I'd encourage you to maybe flip that one. We all benefit from the sacrifice and the service that others have given for many, many decades prior to us coming along and taking advantage of the fruits of that hard labor. So we do have, all of us have a responsibility to give back and service. And as we serve others, there is this natural reservoir of energy that comes back to us. So I would encourage you to give some thought to the various organizations that you can be of service to, so you can get back some positive energy as you go through those periods of service. And again, one more comment about relationships. As we get older, they become critical. Study after study says that not only is it positive on the energy, but just overall health is improved as we keep those interconnections, whether it's through service clubs, co-workers, our church, volunteer organizations. It's really critical, too, that we develop a rich web of relationships with different ages and interests and that kind of thing as being part of our overall energy and wellness strategy. Okay, like I said, I was going to spend a little bit more time talking about some basic tips on the food we eat. It's a really critical area, so we'll continue to focus in on the area as we go through this presentation. So this next slide is kind of interesting. Former President of the United States, no longer the president down there, but anyway, it's a great picture of him enjoying some great food. So let's talk a little bit about some tips around the eating or dietary practice area. So the first thing that I would say is fight the tendency to be mindless in your eating. A lot of us are mindless. We're putting stuff in our mouths, but we're not paying attention to our choices, the kinds of foods we're eating. We're eating for emotional comfort. It's just something we need to be more attentive to. So let's cross that out. Let's become mindful, and let's not be mindless when it comes to our food. The next thing is that when you think about your food, you want to be, structured. It's a really good idea to do a little bit of advanced planning with regard to your food. So something as simple as preparing your lunch, healthy lunches the night before, so you're not rushing around the next day. Something as simple as stocking your pantry with healthy foods, not bringing unhealthy foods into the home. That's just a great practice. So the more intentionally you focus around your dietary menu plans through the week, the better the chance that you're going to eat in a cleaner, more healthy kind of fashion throughout the week. The other thing is take a look at your breakfast. Now, this isn't necessarily a good recommendation for everyone, but I think for the majority of us, a good breakfast in the morning is very helpful. And I think making sure that breakfast has a good portion of protein is good. Protein satiates. It also really is good for cognitive function. I'd really encourage you to try to stay away from the cereals and a lot of grains and toast. It just spikes your blood sugar. It's not a great way to sustain energy throughout the day. So make sure you have your breakfast, maybe a couple of eggs, maybe some low-fat yogurt, or not low-fat, just Greek yogurt, add a few berries, maybe some granola, but make it healthy and be consistent. Don't go rushing out of the house in the morning having no breakfast. And then by mid-morning, you're completely famished and you're diving for a coffee and a bagel, which is not a great way to sustain energy. So make sure you have breakfast. Now, lunch, generally, should be the biggest meal of the day. And so you want to have a big salad, a protein source, and really fill up on the calories. You're metabolically way more active. You have the rest of your afternoon and day ahead of you. And then dinner in general, you want to be a light. You don't want to be having a massive meal. Again, it could be a salad, some sautéed vegetables. Doesn't have to be a lot of food. And try to make sure you're finished your eating by about 7 p.m. You don't need a lot of calories sitting in your body, not likely to be used because you're not as active later in the day. So being attentive to this sort of sequence of eating probably is a very important thing to be mindful of. So the next thing to be aware of would be hydration. I think that most of us have heard about the importance of this. Now, it's potentially you can be too hydrated. So there's a balance here. I think a good rule of thumb around hydration is just take a look at the color of your pee. If it's dark yellow, you're probably not hydrated enough, and if it's a lighter color, you're probably in good shape. So my only comment really around hydration is just pay attention to it because your energy is impacted by your level of hydration. So make sure you're properly hydrated. The other thing is that you want to make sure you're focused on, I think, as much as possible, and this is not always something we can do, is focus on organic, and organic is to the best of your ability. Obviously, depending on where you live, and depending on the time of year. I mean, if you're in a northern climate, winters are a more difficult time in terms of accessing the kind of quality foods that you want. But certainly once you get into the early summer months, make sure you go to farmers markets or organic gardens to get high quality foods. And you want to make sure as much as possible to find foods in close proximity. I think that's a really critical thing. And even better, why not start your own garden so you know exactly where that food is coming from. The other thing is you want to make sure, and many of us have heard about this already, to have healthy fats. So fat's not necessarily bad, but we want to make sure we have the omega-3 fats. So it could be olive oil, it could be avocados, it could be flaxseed oil. Again, this is not to be a long treatise on healthy fats, but try to eliminate the bad fats and make sure you're introducing the good fats into your diet. And I've just listed a few of those as good for your cognition and overall body health, and so it's something you want to be thinking about. The other thing is when you're going grocery shopping, just make sure that you're spending most of your time on the outside aisles. So if you go to a grocery store on the outside aisles, typically it's your meats and your vegetables, your fruits, that kind of thing. As you go towards the inner part of the store, you're now talking about processed foods and canned goods. I mean, if you read a label and you can't pronounce most of the ingredients that are on that label, probably not a good idea to eat that food. So there's no reason why most of us can't get the majority of our food as clean food, that's real food. And the more that you stick towards the outside of the grocery store, the better off you are likely going to be. So just a basic tip around that whole area. Now, another area is fermented foods. And there's a lot of ways of getting fermented foods. Now, the idea here is fermented foods helps to promote good gut flora, good microbiome. Those are the good bugs that help with the overall functioning of our digestive system and the health of our bodies. And so that things like kefir, pickles, kombucha, which is fermented tea, sourdough, yogurt, sauerkraut. I think you get the basic idea. These are great foods, and they're great for overall health. So if you're not introducing fermented foods right now into your diet, I'd encourage you to do that. It'll just improve your overall health. So that's something you want to be focusing on over the next year to improve your energy and your overall resilience from a health standpoint. So the other thing you want to do is cultivate a general attitude of gratefulness. That doesn't have anything directly to do with healthy food choices, but I think cultivating this attitude has an overall impact in our life that is just makes it better, and lots of studies confirm that. So I don't think you have to be religious to engage in this practice, but saying a prayer of thanks when you're eating, I think is a good tradition, a good ritual to be engaged in. And quite frankly, as you pray, as you meditate, as you are thankful for the food that you have, it might have the potential to calm your nerves, to maybe relax you a little bit better, because the notion of gratefulness, the notion of taking time to break bread with others, to engage in relationship, and to also eat in a relaxed kind of environment is absolutely critical to our overall nutritional best practices. In other words, our digestive system works better when we are relaxed. If we're tense and we're full of stress and we're shoveling down our food, rushing through our lunch hour to get that done, in all likelihood, we're not getting the nourishment from our food that we should, because our digestive system is compromised when we're in a stressful situation. So, when you think about stress, we think about that fight or flight kind of response. So the fight or flight response is such that if a sympathetic nervous system is activated, it basically shunts blood away from our digestive system to our extremities, to our limbs, to get us ready for battle or to run. That does not help digestion. If our parasympathetic nervous system is active, we're more relaxed, and now that blood is in our digestive system, and we can make use of the food more effectively. The other thing that you may want to think about is engage in a fast. There's no doubt that when we move food out of our world for a while, we don't take it for granted. We miss it. We have yearnings. We have hunger pangs. And so it could be an intermittent fast where you stop eating from 4 o'clock on until the next noon hour. It could be a full day or 2-day or 3-day fast. And I think the religious traditions have it right. There's often fasts built in different festivals and religious traditions. And I think that brings to awareness again the pure enjoyment and privilege we have of having food aplenty and good food, and that we should never take it for granted. That ties into the gratefulness idea. And finally, don't rush. Make food. Yes, resource and energy. It fuel our bodies. It's about health, but it's also about relationships, and it's about relaxing. So those are just some tips. If you go to the Resilient Professional ebook, we have a few sections or chapters on some best practice ideas around food, and I'd encourage you to go to that information. The next area I want to talk about is this notion of a mental reboot. So let me just share with you some thoughts on this area. I think the research is pretty clear on this, is that we live in a period of anxiety. I think a lot of people are going through their life in low-grade anxiety, and it's having an impact on our ability to function cognitively and emotionally, relationally. And so if we can find strategies that allow us to counteract that, I think it's well worth introducing those strategies into our schedules. So another way of capturing this year in terms of being intentional and making it a great year is to make sure that our minds are free of the clutter and anxiety that gets created from two main sources. So one is just the sheer overload of information. Now, if you're retired, you have a lot more control over this than someone who's full on in an employment situation. I think you have a lot more ability to control the information that streams into your consciousness and your subconsciousness. If you're in a work context, it's quite frankly very overwhelming, the amount of information that people have to deal with in an information economy. And so all we have to do is just one area is look at emails. I mean it's a battle every day to fight the email inbox monster, to keep it organized and staying on top of things. So there's the avalanche of information, digital information, media, all crying out for our attention. We get sucked into consuming this stuff on a regular basis, and a lot of the information is negative, and so it influences us at the very least at a subconscious level. Many years ago, David Allen wrote a book called Getting Things Done, and so the content on this slide is really flowing from a lot of the work that David Allen did, and he found that certain practices help people to sort of raise themselves above the fray, so they can become more productive, more focused, they can get things more done, and had a better chance of accomplishing their goals through the year, irrespective of the amount of information coming their way. So that's what I want to share with you. Whether you're retired or whether you're working full-time, whether you're a student, I think this information is relevant. Now, it's interesting that David Allen referred to the mind, so this mental reboot. He talks about your mind sort of having this processor. So the central processor that he's referring to as it relates to our mind is our prefrontal cortex, and that's the executive functioning, the thinking, the planning part of our brain. And one of his comments was that many people hold way too much information in that part of their brain. So, they're doing things for the day, they're trying to reflect, ponder, plan, do all these executive functions within the brain, and at the same time they're trying to hold a whole bunch of to-do lists and things that they have to sort of get accomplished. Now, your brain does that naturally. It tends to hold on to this stuff because it's worried that you don't have placeholders for it. So his whole idea is that we need to have a very structured way of organizing information that comes into our life, and we need to have placeholders for these things so that we're not holding them in our prefrontal cortex. They're not holding them in, that thinking executive function part of our brain. To the extent that we do that, we're crowding out our capacity to be creative and to be processing the important things that we need to be thinking about and making good quality decisions. There was some research that was done, and this is on Harvard Business Review article that I came across, and it said current research suggests that the surging volume of available information and its interruption of people's work can adversely affect not only personal well-being, but also decision-making, innovation, productivity. In one study, for example, people took an average of nearly 25 minutes to return to a work task after an email interruption. That's bad news for both organizations and individuals. And so that's just one example of how long it took people to get refocused. In another Harvard Business Review article, they said, well, the choice or the chorus of wanting punctuated by our own discomfort moans apparently has some validity. Researchers say that the stress of not being able to process information as fast as it arrives, combined with the personal and social expectations that say you will answer every email, can deplete and demoralize you. Edward Holloway, a psychiatrist and expert on attention deficit disorders, argues that the modern workplace induces what he calls attention deficit trait, with characteristics similar to those of the genetically based disorder. So this is not an unimportant kind of issue. So what we want to talk about is those strategies that allow us to kind of reboot our RAM, to clear it up, and to allow us to be more effective through the year as we're engaged in accomplishing the important things that we want to accomplish. So what I'd encourage you to do is to pick up the book, Getting Things Done. It'll be referenced in the show notes underneath this video. I'm just going to talk about a couple of strategies that David Allen referred to. And this is really one of the very first things that you need to do to recapture your prefrontal cortex's ability to be functioning at peak capacity. I think there's a great quote, rest your mind so you can hear the whispers of your heart. We all need times when we are disengaging from the world and all the information flows so that we can really listen to the inner promptings within us. There's a lot of things that we go past through the day, we don't pay attention to, and if you want to tap into your purpose and your values and your vision for the future and your vision for the year, you need to get this particular area dialed in effectively. And we'll talk about the importance of cultivating purpose and vision and mission later on in this presentation. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this notion of a mind dump. And the mind dump is very simple. Basically, what David Allen talks about is basically, the idea of lists. And all a mind dump is to set aside some time, get an 8.5 by 11 pad of paper, and start doing just a free streaming listing of all the things that you think you need to get done. The first time you do this, it might be difficult, but the reality is once you get going, you're going to have all kinds of things come to your consciousness from your subconscious mind as you begin writing all the things down on your to-do list that you have to get done. That's the first step in sort of this decluttering of your mind process. And once you get all those things done, then you need to find placeholders for what you're going to do with all those tasks. And that's the next step, which is contextualizing the to-dos. Now, all of us have had the experience that when we're feeling overwhelmed, taking out a piece of paper and writing out a to-do list was extremely helpful. I think we all get that. But where we fail is that once we do the to-do list and we have this temporary relief that feels great, we don't have a great process or system for capturing those to-dos and begin acting on them. And what happens if we don't act on them, again, that anxiety starts building up again. And so we write the to-do lists, but then our prefrontal cortex, our thinking part of our brain, holds on to them and doesn't release them. So contextualizing your to-dos is a strategy for releasing that so that your subconscious mind believes that you've got a good system to organize those to-dos. So let's talk about contextualizing the to-dos. Once you have an idea about what you want to get accomplished, then you're going to have things like the home context, the office context, the computer context, the errand context, as an example. Now, let's give you an example of this. So I realized on my to-do list that I've got some batteries I have to pick up and some light bulbs. Well, that shouldn't be on some general list that's out there. Those kinds of things should be on your errand list. If I need to get some batteries or light bulbs, then I'll put it on that list. And that list I have with me, might be on my iPhone, might be on a piece of paper I keep in my jacket. But it's important that you contextualize that list, because how often have you been out doing errands and you get a whole bunch of things done? You're relying a little bit on your memory about what you need to get done. You get home and you suddenly realize there's a bunch of things that you didn't get, or one or two critical things that you wanted to get. So that's an example. You have certain errands that you need to get done, put it on your errand context list. Other things need to be done in the home context, and then some things can only be done in the office context when you're at the work. So hopefully you get the basic idea of that. The other thing is that you can take those items and begin putting them into various next actions. And the next action is basically, what are you going to do with that information? So some information, his rule of thumb is if you can do it in under 2 minutes, just get it done. If it can't be done, then take that next action and file it in a relevant placeholder. I just talked about that. Some information that you come across is more for filing and future reference. Some is things you have to respond to right away. But you want to start putting those next actions into a context in which, what is the next action to actually move the project on? His basic thinking is that we're really fuzzy around that. So when you have a task to get done, what really is the next step? So I might have to get my car in for service work. Is that the next action? Well, actually, no. The next action might be I need to research a car repair shop that I think in my area would be appropriate to go to. Or it might be I need to go Google the phone number for the repair shop. I mean, there are some very specific steps that we might have to take before we actually get the car to the repair shop, if you know what I mean. So I'd encourage you to pick up the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen, and he will go through this in much more detail. But if you're looking to really make this year supercharged in terms of productivity, I think that's a really good read, and he gives you these kinds of strategies to give you peace of mind, to reduce anxiety, and to actually get things done in this information age in which all of us are living. Well, the next area we want to talk about is simplifying and decluttering. So we just talked about decluttering and simplifying within our internal world. So this notion of something as simple as a to-do list, getting everything on a piece of paper. Once it's on a piece of paper, developing a system that allows you to catalog all those next actions into placeholders and to contextualize those placeholders. So that'll give you a start in terms of the internal chatter that's going on in your mind. Really important to do that, because when we don't do that, we get sidetracked, we get distracted, we don't make the progress we want to. So keep that in mind. And like I said, David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, is an excellent resource that you should be utilizing in this digital age. Now, simplifying and cluttering, now we're going to move into mostly the clutter in our external world. And the external world has a really big impact. So, just by looking at these two images here, you got the one image of it kind of looks like my storage area garage. My wife is absolutely amazing at decluttering or uncluttering. In fact, I have to be really careful. If I leave piles around too long, they just kind of disappear. And I can sympathize. There's clutter that sort of builds up in our house with the six of us running around with our various activities. And Tanya is very, very disciplined at, when you take something out, everything has its place. When you're done with it, it only takes a minute. Put it back where you got it from. And when she goes through a room, she is absolutely incredible at decluttering, simplifying. And when you come into a room like that, you just feel a lot better. So I love the title of this book, Simplify, 7 Guiding Principles that you can help declutter both your home and your life. And so we're going to talk about some of these principles. I think they're really, really important ones, and these are not necessarily new things for you. I'm sure you've heard of them before, but let's cover off some of the points. Now, why do we need to be mindful around clutter? Well, one of the things it does is it basically gives us excessive stimulus or stimulation. Right? So we've got all this stuff coming into our lives on a regular basis, and that excessive stimulation can also basically lead to stress in our lives, so additional stress. So that's one of the reasons why you want to declutter. You also want to declutter because it distracts us. So even when you're going about your day and you think you're being focused and you got your to-do list and you're ranking through the most important to least important and you're starting your day, it's very easy at a subconscious level to be distracted when you got piles all around you. Piles on your desk, and piles on your counters, and piles in your storage areas. I mean, it is this constant background noise that keeps us from being effective. And the other thing is that it signals to our brains that basically the work is never done. And so even when you do get work done, sending this subconscious subtle message your way that, you know what, it's always done. You put everything away and everything has a placeholder, and you look around and there's no clutter and everything's organized. It just gives you this subconscious sense that, you know what, I've got things in hand here. And it does definitely reduce stress in our lives. The other thing about clutter is it creates additional guilt in our lives. So when we see piles around, we just feel guilty all the time that we're just not getting to the things that we should get at. And probably one of the biggest things, and this is something that we need to be aware of both professionally and personally, is that clutter and just stuff that's all around us will rob us of our creativity, so our ability to be creative, and our productivity. Right? So if you're just trying to be hard-nosed here, by focusing on clutter, you'll become more productive, more creative, and certainly in a professional context, that will be very helpful. And clutter can lead to frustration. Right? So is there an article or is there a reason to declutter? I think these are great reasons. Excess of stress, it distracts us, we never feel the work's done, we feel guilty, it robs us of our productivity and creativity, and it creates frustration. Now, the nice thing about clutter is the fact that it can be easily fixed. We can make progress with clutter. We have some things in our life that I'll refer to as dilemmas, and other things that are problems. Now, dilemmas are things that are kind of chronic. They never really go away, but problems are things that you can sort of attack and make progress and hopefully get off your to-do list. So it's one of those things where decluttering you can attack, and it's one of the easiest stressors to fix. So that's the first thing we need to keep in mind. The other thing that you want to do, and this is a real challenge, but get the whole family involved. So to the greatest extent possible, make this a family project. And to the extent that you can do that, you'll make more progress. And so the book I just referred to has some ideas, and there's some great ideas on the web that talk about how you can get the whole decluttering agenda sort of cast as a vision to your family, and hopefully get a little bit of pickup from your family members to help you out with this initiative. Here's a few tips. So the first thing is you want to create some designated spaces for frequently used items and supplies, so you can quickly and easily find what you're looking for. Okay, so we'll just say designated spaces. And so it could be the hobby drawer, it could be the handyman drawer, but you get the point. So there's specific areas that are set aside in your house to organize different utensils or things that you need. And whenever you're finished with a particular project, you know that what you're going to do with that is you're going to you're going to walk it back to where you got it from. If you don't use it, you don't want it, you don't need it, then get rid of it. You want to start purging things within your home. So again, we have great sentimentality around the things that we own. We don't easily sort of purge, but you do need to get your head wrapped around this notion that purging will ultimately lead to this lack of clutter, less clutter, which has a whole bunch of side benefits. We just tend to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and we've got this ridiculous situation in our lives where people just have storage bins and storage lockers and storage units that we're paying good money just because we're storing things, so we can't kind of figure out what we want to do with them. We get attached for various reasons to these things, and it gets a little bit crazy after a while. So, purging is an important part of the uncluttering process. Like I said, when you take something out of its designated space to use, put it back immediately after you're finished with it. And it sounds really simple, but it actually takes some practice and commitment. So it's one of those things that, we have these unconscious behaviors that keep us from staying in an uncluttered world. It'll take some intentionality initially, but eventually it's going to become a habit for you. The other is, don't let papers pile up. This is one that really gets people, right? So don't let papers pile up. Random papers strewn everywhere can really be public enemy number one when it comes to a stress and stressful clutter. It really can. So, we're inundated with mail and flyers and menus and memos and newspapers, all kinds of things. So the key is to be conscious of what you bring and what other people bring into your spaces at home, right? So as soon as you can, take these papers, toss them out, get them in the recycle bin, get them out of the house if they're not really relevant anymore. And basically declutter your primary workspace before you leave it. In other words, it's a really good practice both in the context of your home as well as your work to try to declutter as much as possible. Some of us are better at it than others, but if we go back to the previous slide, we talk about creativity and productivity here as being really critically important things to foster. By keeping an organized workspace, you're going to be that much more productive and creative and a little bit less frustrated. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline some other things in the area of clutter that maybe you haven't really thought about before, but I think they are relevant. So again, we already talked about this, your possessions. Most of us have too many material possessions, so you want to make sure you become a little more intentional around the kind of stuff you have around the house. How about uncluttering your schedule? Many of us are overcommitted. This notion of your time commitments. Most of us have filled our days full to beginning and end, and our hobbies and volunteer activities and kids' activities. So when possible, release yourself from the time commitments that are not in line with your greatest values. So I get that these things are important, but start getting a little more intentional. We often think, say yes to things because we're good-willed people, but at the end of the day, it may be crowding out time for the really truly important things and relationships in your life. What about your goals? Why don't you reduce the number of goals that you're intentionally striving for in your life? Sometimes we have too many goals. We become so torn in many different directions. Become maybe for this year more focused on just a few goals and see if you can make some progress. So unclutter your goals list a little bit. And what about negative thoughts? Have you ever thought that your negative thoughts are really a form of clutter? Most negative emotions are completely useless. Things like resentment and bitterness and hatred and jealousy, they'll never improve your life for sure. And so take responsibility for your mind, unclutter it of all those negative thoughts, and maybe replace it with a few really, really powerfully positive and productive thoughts that might be helping you. Here's another one to think about. How about uncluttering your words? Some of us are people of few words, and so when we communicate with impact. That's our natural default. That's probably a good trait to have generally, but some of us are just, we're just very verbal, talk all the time, we're motor mouths, we have verbal diarrhea, we talk even before we think. And so I think most of us are probably talk too much, listen too little. And so for this year, maybe one of your ways of becoming more intentional around this year is start uncluttering your words. Maybe talk a little bit less and ask a few more questions. The other thing is unclutter your diet. This notion of eating a cleaner diet, eating more organic foods, we already talked about that. Cleaning out all those things that are extraneous, the sauces, the spices, the sugars, the extra unhealthy ingredients, become more pure. Unclutter your food. Maybe unclutter your screen time. And so maybe you're cluttering your world full of time on your iPhone and your iPad and your technology. Maybe this year could be a year where you're uncluttering a little bit and just finding a good book or a great edifying hobby that might be something you can really sink your teeth into. And maybe your connections to the world need to be fortified more. So maybe you're in a million relationships, you're torn in many different directions. Maybe unclutter, like I said, all those commitments and focus on one or two relationships and try to deepen them and really make a commitment to spend time doing that. And lastly, multitasking. A lot of people are guilty of trying to do too much, and they think they're being productive, but research indicates that multitasking really increases stress and lowers productivity, while single tasking, that's kind of an interesting way of phrasing it, is becoming a lost art. So you need to learn it. How can I be just focused and present right now, focus the next 25 minutes on the important thing at hand, and stop trying to do multiple things, whether it's texting on my phone and doing this and doing that. And as part of that, back to the relationship idea, is when you're talking to someone, really focus on the person you're talking to. Never look at your phone. Never be distracted. That should be your policy. Tough to do in this information age and digital technology that's swirling all over the place, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. So, uncluttering, decluttering, however you want to say it. This is another way you can capture this year and make it more intentionally great by focusing on maybe just one or two of these strategies for this year. Okay, what I want to talk about is be aware of the gap. So what in the world is the gap? Gap's an interesting idea. I was first exposed to the gap idea by Dan Sullivan, who founded a company called The Strategic Coach, which basically provides mentorship and coaching for entrepreneurs and business people. And the concept is really simple, but I think it really explains why there's an awful lot of people out there who are unhappy with their lives, people who have achieved a great amount of success, and yet, in spite of that success, are walking around with a little gray cloud over top of their heads. And so what we want to do is talk about this notion of the gap, and if you, I think, at a conscious level, understand what the gap is, how it works, I think it's going to lead to more happiness, a greater sense of satisfaction, and you'll be able to harness your psychological and emotional abilities much more effectively. So let's take a look at the gap. Now the way you'll understand the gap is to kind of look at the three components of time. And so when we look at time, we have the past, and we have the now or today, right? The current moment that we're in, and then we have the future. Now, if you go to the Strategic Coach, just Google strategiccoach.com website, they put together actually a course that actually walks you through the notion of the gap and how to harness the gap analysis to be more effective. So I'm going to give you just a very short overview on what it is. So a lot of people, as they look at their future, right? The future is really important because the future is where your goals and our vision and our hope resides, right? All those things are there down the road, and we think that if we accomplish those things, that's going to lead to happiness and a life of satisfaction. Now, what I want to be very clear on is focusing on your future, having that idealized vision of what you think the future is going to look like is extremely important. I mean, it's our idealized version of the future that creates the excitement and motivation to set goals for down the road, right? So we vision out this exciting future, and then it's a roadmap that we want to begin following. We go back to today, and in today's context, we're going to have our goals and our action plan, and we're going to start checking those things off as we pursue our future. Now, here's the problem with the future. The future is kind of like the horizon, as Dan Sullivan says. You never actually get to it. So as feverishly as you work, as hard as you work, as many goals you accomplish, you will never reach the horizon. Now, you might get close to it, you might accomplish something that's similar to it, but if you're benchmarking your future happiness on what this future looks like, you're setting yourself up for a lot of unhappiness and disillusionment, because you're never going to get there. You could accomplish incredible things, but you won't see those incredible accomplishments because what you're doing is you're looking at your accomplishments through the lens of what your idealized future is going to be. And we need to make this cognitive shift that the idealized future doesn't exist. Like, it's not going to happen, right? Something's going to happen, and it might be a great future, but it's not going to be the one that you're idealizing. As hard as you work to try to accomplish it, your actual achievements will be a little bit different, or maybe massively different than what your initial idealized version of the future is going to be. So that's where the past comes in, and in reflecting. Now, we don't want to get caught in the past, but the past really is important because it gives us an idea of our progress. So when you set some goals for the future, the way that you're going to have a sense of accomplishment and a sense of achievement is by looking at not the future, but looking back at the past and reflecting on, where was I 2 years ago? Where was I a year ago? Where was I 5 years ago? And where am I today? What things have gone well? And you know what? I should pat myself on the back. I've made some really great accomplishments. Now, I may not have hit my idealized future, but that's okay. I've actually made some great progress towards that future that I'm trying to aspire to. So the role of your past is to give you a sense of encouragement that you're making progress, you're moving towards your goals, that you deserve to be patting yourself on the back. And maybe it's a little bit of a kick in the you-know-what as well, if you're not making progress you want. The role of your future is to create this passion for this vision for the future. It's the rocket fuel that gets you working today on your goals and action plan. So too many people are looking at the future to set their goals, which is great, but then they benchmark their progress based on how they've done relative to their future, which they'll never get to because it's like the horizon, as opposed to benchmarking the progress by their past. How much progress have they made? Some people do it naturally. They use the future to create excitement and vision, to get them moving on their goals and action plans, and they look at their past to see how well they've done and to pat themselves on the back. But there's a whole group of people out there that never look at the past. They don't think it's relevant, and they're always benchmarking against this idealized future. So just a little bit of a tip about how you should handle the gap analysis and how you need to handle today, the future, and the past. Hopefully that's a helpful little distinction. You want to reflect in your own life to see whether you're future-oriented, past-oriented, and whether you're harnessing the future properly as a way of being a goal catalyst, and whether you're using the past to be a source of encouragement. The next area, in terms of harnessing the year and making it amazing, is to maybe focus on your relationships. Now, for some of you, maybe your relationships are just awesome. But I think for a lot of people listening to this and watching this video, it's going to be, well, I could probably make some improvements in this area. And we know that relationships are absolutely critical. We could be doing everything right, and yet if the relationships aren't in good shape, if we have one relationship that is just not doing well, that can bring down our energy and our effectiveness in so many other areas of our life. When our relationships are working well, generally, our overall life is just supercharged. And so a big part of strong relationships is this notion of trust. I think if you just focus on trust, you're really going to grease the tracks in terms of great relationships. Now again, I use the example of Dan Sullivan, who had this idea of harnessing the 4 habits of trust. And I thought when I first heard it, it was very simple. But if you take a look at these 4 habits, they basically crystallize every important aspect of the relationships that we have in life. So the first one is to say please and thank you. Saying please and thank you shows respect. It shows honor. It is really engaging in the basic ideas of civility. And that helps to set the stage for trust in a relationship. Another thing that really sets the stage is to show up on time. You will know people in your own life who are chronically late for things. Doesn't matter how much of a head start you give them. It's just their orientation. The problem is that the vast majority of people don't see that as being fashionably late. They see it as being late, and they see it as being disrespectful. So if you're trying to engender trust, you want to make sure you're showing up a little bit early, and certainly not late. And if you're running late, it's extremely important that you show that person the courtesy of trying to get a hold of them, explaining you're running late, letting them know the context. That speaks volumes to individuals. But it is not acceptable to be showing up late for things on a consistent basis. That says a lot about you, and it shows a lot, demonstrates at least at an unconscious level, how you feel about the relationship. So if you're trying to engender trust, show up on time. It might be sounding harsh, but I think it's a really important thing. And there's people who just step over this one all the time. I know it's difficult. I mean, we all have busy lives, and trains come up, and traffic's bad, so you can't, handle it all the time. But if you are running late, pick up the phone, use your cell phone, let the person know what the context is, why you have to reschedule, why you're running late. Number 3 is do what you say you'll do. Okay, so if you commit to something, do it. And if a person's in a relationship with you and you consistently follow through on what you say you're going to do, that will engender trust for sure. And then the last one is complete or finish what you start. And we all have been guilty of this, I think, or some of us anyway. I know I have. You start off with lots of fanfare. You're really excited about the project, and you start moving. But you know what? You just don't have the staying power to get it done. And other people have to step in, and they can't trust you you're going to get the work done. That does not engender trust. So it's really important that you either have a team around you that helps you get things done, that you complete what you start. You do these 3 things, these 4 things. Say please and thank you, show up in time, do what you say, complete what you start. You will engender trust. And you do it consistently over time, then people will find favor in you. And in business, you'll get referrals and new business and repeat customers. And relationships, people will come to trust you, and you'll be able to deepen your relationship. So these simple things, they're very simple. They're hard to execute on. And you want to look at the relationships in your life. Is there anyone in your life that's important? But when you look at these habits, are you following through on them? And if you're not, why not? And set up an agenda for this year to get better. That'll help to supercharge this year. Now, the next area I want to take a look at is relationships in the context of being likable. And believe it or not, likability is really, really important. One of the things that has been researched, and I know UCLA and other organizations have researched this notion of likability and have built likability factors or quotients. And we have this notion that, the intense, intimidating manager or CEO, that browbeats and intimidates people into action is somehow the sort of the caricature of what we need to be pursuing as business people or life success. And nothing could be further from the truth. And almost every metric you want to look at, relationships, business, income, success, in every area you can think of, likable people do better. And at a basic common sense level, that kind of makes sense. We like to do business with people we like. Pure and simple. It's a really important driver in our lives. So what we want to do is, take a look at some of these factors. Likability Factor by Tim Sanders is a great book. Tim Sanders gets into some of the basic points that you want to keep in mind. And I'll just kind of give you a basic listing of some of the main points. So what are the things you can do to be more likable? So the first thing when you're with people is to ask questions. Show you're interested. This is not about you. It's not about you doing a monologue for the first 20 minutes about how great you are. If you want to be likable, you want to just maybe put that down a little bit and ask more questions of others. Show that you're genuinely interested. Ask questions. Get them to talk about themselves. The other thing you want to do is you want to put away your phone. So again, we live in an age where our phones are always with us. It's very distracting. Nothing shows more disrespect to someone, though, than when you're in the middle of a conversation, you're looking at your phone. So when you're in a meeting or in a one-on-one conversation or a lunch meeting or with family and friends, put the phone away. If you want to be likable, that's going to go a long way to increasing your likability quotient. The next thing is likable people are basically genuine. Okay, they don't feign, and fawn over people. It's not false praise. They're comfortable in their own skin. They're okay with making compliments. And when they make compliments, they're genuine compliments. They're not, made up things to sort of maneuver and manipulate and get their way. So just be a genuine person. Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And that genuine kind of demeanor will help to engender likability with others. So when we talk about likability, we're not talking about the glad-handing, hail hearty, how are you kind of personality. I mean, maybe those people are likable, but that's not really the important part in the scale. You don't have to be out there larger than life for people to like you. You just have to be genuine. And you do that, you're going to get relationships that will come your way. The other thing is don't be quick to pass judgment, right? I think you need to have a bit of an open hand with people. We basically, and I think it's a survival thing in many ways, we often aren't open-minded enough. And so resist the urge to pass judgment and have first impressions drive most of your interactions with people. People are way more complex than the first 6 seconds. And those first seconds, can influence us, but we don't know whether that person's having a bad day. We don't know whether they've been distracted because they've got some really negative news and information they're trying to handle in that moment. So give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't pass judgment right away. Give them a little bit of time to kind of demonstrate who they really are. Don't seek attention. So likable people don't have to be the life of the party. They don't have to have the spotlight. That's, I think, an important characteristic. And so when you're driven by, attention and accomplishment, we shift the focus away from other people and we shift the focus to ourselves. And so you want to be genuine. The other thing, and this tied to the trust habits, is likable people are consistent. That engenders trust. And the other thing, which is very interesting, they use positive body language. So likable people use positive body language. And so what do I mean by that? Well, gestures, expressions, tone of voice, making certain that they're positive when they're talking to people in a genuine way, using a somewhat enthusiastic tone but not over the top, uncrossing your arms, so having a kind of an open kind of body language, maintaining eye contact, leaning towards a person who's speaking. Those are all forms of positive body language. So you want to sort of pay attention to those things. Don't be completely, unconscious of the body language and your tone of voice and your expressions with others. Another thing is you want to greet people by name. I know in my resolution list for this year, that's a really important one. Some people are just really, really good at this, but I think most of us need to be intentional and really work at it. But nothing improves your likability more than just, greeting someone by name, to smile. Don't look dour. You want to make sure that you smile. They balance passion and fun. And they know how to use touch strategically. Now, there's some people you just can't touch and other people that will be open to it. It doesn't have to be overt kind of touching, right? But when you touch someone during a conversation, you release oxytocin in their brain, and that's a neurotransmitter that makes their brain associate you with trust and a whole bunch of other positive feelings. a simple touch on the shoulder, a friendly handshake is all it takes to release this very powerful brain chemical. So you want to make sure that you try to introduce some mild touching into your conversations and your interactions with people. But you also have to be sensitive. Some people have a really big bubble and they wouldn't feel comfortable with it. But in general, there's light, sort of touch gestures that can really improve the relationships you have with others. So that's the likability factor. Just a few points. It probably seems really, really airy-fairy, and how important is that? It's really important, right? It's very easy for us to get distracted and go through our day and be dour and not smile and not show interest in other people and not ask questions and make it all about us. If you do that consistently, you're going to reduce your likability. And the natural ripple effect is you're going to reduce your professional success and, quite frankly, your financial outcomes and your personal happiness. So it's a big one. You want to focus in on it. A practical way that you can become more likable and build relationships is maybe get into the practice of a really old-fashioned idea, and that's writing cards to people. And so when you're in conversation and you hear that someone's going through a difficult time with their health or a relationship, or they got a job promotion, or they're just about to retire, or they just came back from a trip that was awesome, make a note of that. And then when you get back to your office, or you maybe have some cards in your briefcase, write out a personalized note, seal it up, put a stamp on it, drop it in the mailbox, old snail mail. It really has impact because what it tells a person that you actually spent a few moments of your time writing out a handwritten note. You took the time to seal it. You took the time to put it in the mailbox. To me, that's a real powerful expression, particularly in this day and age where everything's digital, texting and emails. So if you want to stand apart from the crowd, embrace an old-fashioned idea, get some stationery, maybe some personalized stationery with personal cards, a packet of stamps, have some at home, have some in your office, have some in your briefcase. So wherever you are, you make it really easy in that moment to write on a note, and it'll be powerful. People will really notice that gesture. So why don't you do that for this year, see how it kind of revs up your relationships, and if your relationships are better, your year is going to be better. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the process of change. The process of change is really, really critical. In fact, this probably should have been the very first slide that I put into the presentation, because at the end of the day, everything we've talked about, you're not going to have the motivation to really do it unless you're being driven by a very, very powerful purpose. So if you want to make this year amazing, it's worth spending some time trying to renew and remind yourself, or cultivate it for the first time, what is your powerful purpose? Why are you on the earth? What really excites you? Spend some time understanding your values. What drives your behavior? What are important to you in terms of values? Understand your vision, your mission in each area of your life, and then set up some specific action plans or goals to accomplish the vision or mission in each of your areas of your life. So when you're talking about missions, right? You could have a mission in the area of health. You could have a mission in the area of your family. You could have a mission in the area of your professional world. And so mission is sort of an action plan, what you want to accomplish. You want to marry that with a vision, a powerful vision for what it looks like when it's accomplished. And then, like I said, you want to make sure that you develop some very specific action plans, some specific goals, to-dos that you need to do to accomplish these very important things. So let's say that you wanted to have, let's say one of your purposes in life. In fact, let's go to purpose for a second. Okay, so change begins with honesty. Talk about that. You want to be honest with yourself. What's going well, what's not going so well. But the first thing around purpose is you want to ask questions like, why am I here? Why do I exist? Why do I get up in the morning? What is my role in creating the future that I want? Those are really, really critical things that you want to be focusing in on. Spend some time reflecting on these things, because your purpose will be that driver that gets you excited about every day, no matter what challenges are confronting you. If you have a powerful purpose, a powerful why for what you do every day, that really helps you to get through the inertia and the challenges and the frustrations, and to stay positive in the context of things that aren't always going well for you. Now, what I encourage you to do, and like I said, there's a PDF of these slides in the show notes. is spend some time doing a little bit of vision casting. So take time after this workshop or seminar to write out a powerful and exciting vision for what you want to accomplish in each area of your life. I'm talking about one area, but afterwards you may want to work in a whole bunch of areas. What you want to look like, and then begin brainstorming specific steps to get you there. So, like I said, it could be a vision for your family life. What would you like your family life to look like? What's the idealized version of that for this year? Maybe you're a grandparent, you have a vision for that. And then brainstorm some steps that will get you there. Some you can control, maybe some are impacted by others' response to your initiatives. But spend some time at the front end of this year, whether it's health, family, finances, travel experiences, that kind of thing. What does that vision look like? See it, feel it, hear it. Make sure that it's a very clear vision. The next area I want to talk about is the cultivation of grit. Angela Duckworth wrote this book, and basically what she did is she did a whole bunch of research to find out, what character qualities led to success. And, one of the big character qualities that she found was this notion of grit. In other words, people who seemed to accomplish amazing things had this one overriding character trait. And it didn't seem to be tied to IQ or natural ability or anything like that. It really was tied to this notion of grit. So when we think about grit, one of the things that people have grit and achieved extraordinary success is that they had an overriding goal in their life. They had one organizing goal that really defined who they were and what they felt they wanted to accomplish in life. They pursued those goals over very long-term periods. So these were goals they went after over extended periods of time. And these goals, this overarching goal, influenced almost every area of their life. So they had a whole bunch of subordinate goals, but all of these subordinate goals they were accomplishing were all in service of this overarching goal that they were trying to achieve. Now, one of the notions that Angela talks about is that her research says that in many different areas of life, all the natural, ability levels, character traits, IQ, natural abilities that would have predicted success in a whole bunch of different arenas didn't. And this notion of grit was one of the things that consistently percolated up to the surface. It was kind of the defining character quality that defined extraordinary success against just average progression or success or mediocre success or lack of success. So I'd encourage you to pick up the book. It's a great read. If you have children or grandchildren, I think it's seminal work that they need to be aware of, because I think it can influence their success in life. And when I talk about success, I'm not talking necessarily success in a financial sense. I'm talking about success just generally in life, happiness, fulfillment, accomplishing worthy goals and objectives, and making a difference in this world, and hopefully in some ways making the world a little bit better because of the accomplishment of these goals and objectives. So just a little bit of an FYI, a great book to take a look at. The next area I want to focus in on to make this year amazing is your nervous system. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but basically we need to be conscious of the two parts of our nervous system. Many of us are fairly unconscious of this. I think we talked about this earlier in the presentation around our RAM and our minds and overwhelm and how that works. So a lot of us are in sort of low-grade overwhelm. So the sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that is the fight or the flight. So we already talked about that. That gets us ready for action. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the relaxation response. And the sign of a healthy system is a system that can be activated for fight and flight, but very quickly will go back into a relaxation response. And so the oscillation between those two areas and the robustness of that oscillation is a sign of a really good nervous system. But if we're chronically in stress and we're chronically activating the sympathetic nervous system, it can then sometimes be difficult for us to get back into the relaxation response. And so we have some people who are so chronically stressed that they actually never really get into a relaxation response. And of course, that's going to have a really negative impact on health, on cognition, on peace of mind and happiness. So my encouragement to you is to begin introducing strategies into your day. It could be a walk in the park. It could be deep breathing. It could be yoga, meditation. There's all kinds of activities that you can get engaged in that will reduce the stress in your life, so that you're beginning to create a more robust nervous system that can respond both to stress but then can relax pretty quickly. A great resource in this area is HeartMath Institute. And I'd encourage you to go there. There's some great resources, some technologies, that kind of thing. They do a lot of work with Navy SEALs, with the U.S. military, with law enforcement, with first responders. Obviously, those people are under tremendous amounts of stress. They've worked with, to consult on, PTSD and, different disorders that are driven by very stressful events in the life of people. So, if you want to reduce stress and you're looking for some interesting information in the area to make this year amazing, I would encourage you to go to the HeartMath Institute. The next area in terms of making this year amazing is to cultivate the awareness that asking great questions has a profound impact on your life. And this could be asking really insightful questions that encourage you to ponder and think in the area of finances, in your personal life, asking questions about your purpose, asking questions about what a good outcome will look like. And so we'll have some documents linked up with the presentation that you can go through. And one is an example of questions in the area of estate planning or retirement planning. My area of focus is wealth planning. I think the questions in this area are extremely relevant. They're very important. Here's a great question. It really focuses you on your future and what the future needs to look like for you to be happy with your progress. If we're meeting 3 years from today and you were to look back over those 3 years to today, what has to have happened during that period, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy about your progress? That's a great question. And how you answer that question will define, those basic metrics that you're going to measure your success over the next 3 years. So that's an example of how questions can influence our behaviors in the future. So the other thing about questions is to identify dangers, opportunities, and strategies. Again, this is a strategic coach tool. It's very simple, but when we talk about the first point, what you want to do as part of this process, if you've got a challenge, okay, what's the challenge or the goal that you want to achieve? Okay, so that's the first step in this DOS process. The next thing you want to do is you want to list all the dangers. What are the dangers or challenges that could derail you from being successful in this goal accomplishment that you are trying to achieve? What are the opportunities? You want to list the opportunities that will emerge by taking on this goal or challenge. And then lastly, list out all your strengths that are at your disposal to work on the dangers and to seize the opportunities. And so it's important to go through them in this kind of order. So again, this is just a basic framework. When you're approaching a goal, list the goal, outline the dangers, outline the opportunities, outline your strengths. Use that as a precursor, a series of questions to get your mind working about how you're going to overcome this objective. It's important you identify the dangers, because if you don't, subconsciously your brain's thinking about them. So by getting those dangers out in the open and listed will help you to accomplish the goals that you're trying to achieve. So like I said, on the wealth planning arena, we'll have the estate planning questionnaire and the retirement questionnaire that you can take a look at. Obviously, I'm in the wealth planning business, so I'm biased toward those kinds of questions, but they're great questions to review. Well, it's my hope that you found this presentation helpful. It's a long presentation, but I think it's worth going through these points to make this year amazing. Before we conclude, I just wanted to share with you a bit of a process that we've developed called the gap analysis. And so as you're looking at your finances and your wealth planning, which is a critical component to overall life, happiness, fulfillment, and success, then you may want to take advantage of the gap analysis process. This is for individuals who you know what, they think maybe they could be making some improvements to their financial planning. They've got some goals, but they're concerned about some issues, some challenges that they need to be confronting in their financial planning. Maybe they're not completely sure they're on track. And so we offer a complimentary initial discussion to sit down and just talk about your situation. We'll have a few questions back and forth, and we'll explore whether our services can be of any assistance to you. And what the process does, it identifies what your goals are, what you're trying to accomplish, what's going to lead to confidence, peace of mind, and fulfillment financially. We'll then identify if there's any gaps or issues that you need to be dealing with to accomplish your goals. You need to overcome certain gaps or opportunities need to be seized. And then we'll outline specific strategies and a game plan to overcome those things. Lots of people go through this analysis. Many do become clients, some don't for various reasons. But we're more than happy to walk people through this complimentary process to identify, are there gaps, and then to work out very specific solutions to those gaps that are specific to your particular circumstances. So if that's something that you're interested in taking advantage of, then don't hesitate to contact our office, and we'd be more than pleased to talk with you. Again, just as a final reminder, the resource on the Take Charge of Change website, on the homepage, just type in your email. That'll give you immediate access to the resource page where you can download the Resilient Professional ebook, which talks in great detail about many of the strategies that we've talked about today. If you want to contact us, you can reach our office. That's 204-977-8022. And Janelle, who is one of my team members, would be more than happy to talk to you initially. If you want to set up a phone appointment or get more information from our practice, we can do that. And again, our practice website, www.seanhumphreys.com. So again, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. All the best for this year and for future years. And I encourage you to harness some of the principles that we talked about in this presentation to make it a great year. You take care. Bye-bye.